Homeless. Veteran shares. Last meal with stray dog, a TLW documentary. The story follows Michael Thornton, a homeless veteran who shares his last meal with a stray dog named Grace on a cold November morning. An act of compassion witnessed by Margaret, a woman who works with a veterans nonprofit. The narrative flows through his journey from invisibility on the streets, through recovery and healing, to reconnection with his estranged daughter, all anchored by the bond between a broken man and a broken dog who saved each other. There's a bench near the old railroad bridge on the east side of town, paint peeling, wooden slats warped from years of rain and sun. Most people walk past it without a second glance. To them, it's just another forgotten piece of a forgotten part of the city. But to me, that bench was home, and it was there, on a morning so cold I could see my breath hanging in the air like smoke from a dying fire, that I met the one soul in this world who would finally see me. My name doesn't matter anymore. Names belong to people with addresses, with phone numbers, with someone waiting for them somewhere. I lost all of that a long time ago. What matters is what happened on that bench. What matters is the story I'm about to tell you. Because sometimes the moments that change everything don't announce themselves. They just arrive, quiet as snowfall, ordinary as a shared piece of bread. I was 47 years old. I'd been on the streets for 3 years by then, though it felt like 30. Time moves differently when you're invisible. Days stretch out long and empty. Nights feel endless. You learn to measure your life not in months or years, but in small mercies. A dry spot under an overpass when the rain comes. A dumpster behind a bakery that hasn't been locked. A stranger who looks you in the eye instead of through you. I had served my country for 18 years. 3 tours in places most Americans couldn't find on a map. I'd done things I can't talk about and seen things I can't forget. I came home with medals they pinned on my chest and demons they couldn't see. The medals went into a drawer. The demons came to bed with me every night. The VA gave me pills. The pills made me feel like I was wrapped in cotton, watching my own life from somewhere far away. So, I stopped taking them. Then I stopped showing up for appointments. Then I stopped paying rent. Then I stopped everything. It happens faster than you'd think. The slide from functioning human being to ghost. One day you're late on a bill. The next, you're standing on a street corner with everything you own in a trash bag, wondering how in God's name you ended up here. The morning I'm telling you about was late November, the kind of cold that gets into your bones and stays there. I'd spent the night huddled against the back wall of an abandoned warehouse, but they'd chased me out at dawn. Security guards who probably made less money than I used to spend on lunch, telling me I couldn't sleep on concrete in the cold. There's an irony there that stopped being funny a long time ago. So, I made my way to the bench, my bench, the one place in this city where I could sit without someone telling me to move along. I had $17.43 in my pocket. I knew this because I'd counted it 6 times the night before. When you have nothing, you count what little you have. You hold on to those numbers like prayers. I'd decided that morning to spend some of it on food, real food. Not scraps from a dumpster, not the half-eaten sandwich someone left on a park table. I was going to walk into a store like a normal person and buy something to eat. It was a small act of dignity, maybe the last one I had the strength for. There was a gas station about 3 blocks from the bridge. I'd been there before. The kid who worked the morning shift didn't look at me like I was garbage. He'd even said good morning to me once back in September. That small kindness had stuck with me. Funny how you remember things like that when kindness becomes rare. I bought a package of crackers and a can of Vienna sausages. $2.89 plus tax. I remember the exact amount because I stood at the counter counting out the change from my palm, my hands shaking from the cold. The kid didn't rush me. He waited. When I finally had it all counted, he said, "Stay warm out there." 3 words, 3 simple words that made me feel, for just a moment, like I still existed in this world. I walked back to my bench with that small bag clutched against my chest like it was treasure. In a way, it was. I sat down, pulled my coat tighter against the wind, and looked out at the gray November sky. The railroad bridge loomed overhead, rust-streaked and silent. A few dead leaves skittered across the cracked concrete. Somewhere in the distance, a train horn moaned. That's when I saw her. She was standing about 20 feet away, near a scraggly bush that had long since given up trying to grow. A dog, small, maybe 30 pounds, soaking wet. Patches of brown and black fur, but large sections were missing, showing pink, irritated skin beneath. Her ribs were visible even from where I sat. She was shaking, whether from cold or fear or both. I couldn't tell. Our eyes met. And in that moment, something passed between us that I still can't fully explain. Recognition, maybe, The way two people who've been through hell can look at each other and just know. She'd seen hard times. I'd seen hard times. We were the same, her and me, two broken creatures in a world that had stopped caring whether we lived or died. I opened the bag slowly. She watched my every move, tense and ready to run. I could see in her eyes that she expected cruelty. That was what the world had taught her to expect. The thought broke something inside me. Here was this living thing, this innocent creature, and life had beaten her down so thoroughly that she flinched at every sound, every movement, expecting pain. I thought about my crackers, my Vienna sausages, my last real meal, maybe forever. I didn't know when I'd have money again. The shelters were full, the food banks had lines that wrapped around blocks. This was all I had. And I didn't hesitate, not for a second. I opened the can of sausages and set it on the ground between us. Then I sat back on my bench and waited. She didn't move at first. Her nose twitched, catching the scent, but her body stayed frozen. I understood. Trust is the first thing to go when you've been hurt enough. You learn to survive without it. You learn that hope is just another way to get your heart broken. "It's okay," I said softly. My voice was rough. I hadn't spoken to anyone in days. "It's okay, girl. I'm not going to hurt you. I know what it's like. I know." Something in my voice must have reached her, or maybe she was just too hungry to care anymore. She crept forward, one cautious step at a time, her belly low to the ground. When she reached the can, she looked up at me one more time, as if asking permission. I nodded, and then she ate. I watched her devour those sausages like they were the first food she'd had in weeks. Maybe they were. When the can was empty, she licked it clean, pushing it around on the concrete with her nose. Then she looked up at me again, and this time there was something different in her eyes. Not trust exactly, but maybe the beginning of it, the seed of something that could grow if given the chance. I opened the crackers next. I ate a few myself, my stomach grateful for anything solid. Then I broke off a handful and held them out to her. She approached faster this time. When she took them from my fingers, her tongue brushed against my skin, warm and gentle. I felt tears prick at my eyes. I couldn't remember the last time anything living had touched me with kindness. We shared that meal, her and me. We shared it on a cold November morning under a rusted railroad bridge, two forgotten souls who had found each other in the wreckage of their lives. When the food was gone, she didn't leave. She sat down a few feet from the bench, watching me with those dark, knowing eyes. "You got a name?" I asked her. She tilted her head. "No, me neither. Not anymore." I thought about it for a moment. "How about Grace? You like that?" She wagged her tail, just once. A small movement, but it felt like a miracle. "Grace it is then. Named after someone I used to know. Someone who deserved better than what she got." We sat there together as the morning wore on. The cold didn't seem as bitter now. Having another heartbeat nearby does that. It reminds you that you're still alive, still part of something, even if that something is just two strays keeping each other company. I talked to her. I told her things I hadn't told anyone in years, about the war, about the men I'd served with, the ones who came home and the ones who didn't, about my wife who'd tried to stick it out but finally couldn't take it anymore, about my daughter who'd stopped answering my calls, about the night terrors that came without warning, the flashbacks that could be triggered by a car backfiring or a door slamming or nothing at all. Grace listened. She didn't judge. She didn't offer advice or platitudes. She just listened, her eyes never leaving my face. And somehow, that was exactly what I needed. Not solutions, not pity, just someone to witness my pain, to acknowledge that I existed, that my story mattered, even if only to a stray dog on a cold morning. I don't know how long we sat there. Time had stopped mattering, but at some point, I noticed we weren't alone anymore. A woman was standing on the sidewalk about 30 yards away. She was watching us, middle-aged, maybe 50, wearing a nice coat and carrying a leather bag. The kind of person who belonged in the clean, bright parts of the city, not down here where the forgotten people gathered. I tensed. In my experience, people like her only came to places like this to cause trouble, to complain about the homeless ruining their neighborhood, to call the cops, to remind us that we weren't welcome in their world. But she didn't move. She just stood there, watching. And even from that distance, I could see that her face wasn't twisted with disgust or judgment. She looked moved, like she was seeing something that touched her deeply. Grace noticed her too. She growled softly, pressing closer to the bench, closer to me, protecting me. This dog who had nothing, who was half-starved and scarred, and had every reason to think only of herself, was trying to protect me. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent my whole military career protecting others. Now, a stray dog was protecting me. The woman started walking toward us. My whole body went rigid. I prepared myself for whatever was coming. The lecture, the threat, the look of contempt that I'd grown so used to seeing. She stopped a few feet away. Up close I could see her eyes were red, like she'd been crying. She looked at me, then at Grace, then back at me. "I saw what you did," she said. Her voice was thick with emotion. "I was walking to work. I take this shortcut sometimes, through the bridge, and I saw you. I saw you share your food with that dog." I didn't know what to say. I just shrugged. She was hungry. "So were you." It wasn't a question. She'd seen. She knew. "That was your only food, wasn't it?" I looked away. Pride is a funny thing. Even when you have nothing, you still have it. Or maybe especially when you have nothing. She sat down on the bench next to me, not too close, but close enough. Grace watched her warily, but didn't growl. Animals are better judges of character than humans. They sense things we miss. "My name is Margaret," she said. "I work at a nonprofit downtown. We help veterans." She paused. "You're a veteran, aren't you? I can tell." I almost laughed. "That obvious, huh?" "It's something in the eyes," she said, "and the way you sit, alert, like you're always expecting something to happen." She was quiet for a moment. "I lost my brother in Afghanistan. He made it home, but he never really came back. You know what I mean?" I knew exactly what she meant. "He's gone now," she continued. 3 years ago. Couldn't live with the memories anymore." She wiped at her eyes. "That's why I do what I do. I can't save him. But maybe I can help someone else. Maybe I can help you." I'd heard this before. People wanting to help. Social workers and case managers and well-meaning strangers. They all started with good intentions. They all eventually gave up. The system is designed to break you. Too many forms, too many requirements, too many hoops to jump through. And when you're already broken, you don't have the strength to fight it. "I appreciate that," I said, "but I'm beyond help. I've tried." "What's your dog's name?" she asked, changing the subject. "Grace, just named her today." "Grace?" She smiled. "That's beautiful. She's lucky to have found you." "She found me," I corrected. "I didn't do anything." "You fed her when you had almost nothing." Margaret reached into her bag and pulled out a business card. She held it out to me. "I'm not going to push. I know you've been through this before, but this is my card. Our organization, we specialize in hard cases. We don't give up easy, and we have housing that allows pets." I took the card. Veterans Hope Alliance. I'd heard of them. They had a decent reputation as these things go, but I'd also heard they had waiting lists a mile long. "I'll think about it," I said. It was what you say when you don't want to say no, but don't believe in yes. Margaret stood up. "I have to get to work, but I'll come back, same time tomorrow. If you're here, maybe we can talk more." She looked at Grace. "You take care of him, okay, girl?" Grace wagged her tail. After Margaret left, I sat there turning the business card over in my fingers. The rational part of my brain said to throw it away, to accept that this was my life now and stop hoping for anything different. Hope had burned me too many times, but Grace was watching me, and something in her eyes made me slip the card into my pocket instead. That night, Grace stayed with me. She curled up at the foot of my sleeping bag, and her warmth seeped into my bones. I slept better than I had in months. No nightmares, no flashbacks. Just the simple comfort of another heartbeat, another soul sharing the darkness. When I woke at dawn, she was still there, still watching over me. And for the first time in years, I felt something I'd forgotten was possible. I felt like maybe tomorrow was worth seeing. Margaret came back the next day, just like she'd promised. She brought coffee and sandwiches, enough for both of us. She brought a bag of dog food for Grace. And she brought something else. Patience. She sat with me for an hour, asking nothing, expecting nothing, just being present. She came back the day after that too. And the day after that. She never pushed, she never lectured, she just showed up. And slowly, so slowly, something in me began to thaw. Something I'd frozen solid just to survive. On the 4th day, I told her my name, Michael James Thornton. First time I'd said it out loud in over a year. On the 5th day, I let her drive me to her office. Grace came too, sitting on my lap in the front seat of Margaret's car, nervous but trusting. We met some of the other staff. They didn't treat me like a case number or a problem to be solved. They treated me like a human being, like I mattered. The process was still hard. It's always hard. There were forms and assessments and phone calls. There were setbacks and frustrations and moments when I wanted to walk away from all of it and go back to my bench. At least there, I knew what to expect. At least there, I couldn't be disappointed. But every time I thought about giving up, Grace would look at me with those dark eyes. And I'd remember that cold morning. I'd remember sharing my last meal with her. I'd remember that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness are the ones that change everything. 6 weeks after that first morning, I moved into transitional housing, a small studio apartment with a kitchenette and a window that looked out on a parking lot. To most people, it would have seemed like nothing. To me, it was a palace. I had walls, I had a door that locked, I had heat, and I had grace. The housing allowed pets. Margaret had made sure of that. I stood in that apartment on my first night, looking around at the empty space, and I wept. I wept for all the years I'd lost. I wept for the man I used to be and the ghost I'd become. I wept for my brothers who didn't make it home and my brothers who did but couldn't find their way. I wept for my daughter who I'd failed and my wife who'd loved me once. Grace pressed her body against my legs and didn't move until the tears stopped. The months that followed were the hardest of my life, harder even than the streets in some ways. On the streets, all you had to do was survive. Just make it to the next day. There's a strange simplicity to that kind of existence. You don't have to think about the future because there isn't one. You don't have to face your demons because you're too busy fighting for food and shelter. But now I had to do the real work, the inner work. I started therapy. Real therapy, not just a rushed appointment with an overworked VA psychiatrist. I started talking about the things I'd buried, the village in Helmand province, the children, the choices I made in a split second that I'd been replaying in my mind for 15 years. I started taking medication again, too. Different stuff this time, with a doctor who actually listened when I said something wasn't working. It took 3 tries to find the right combination, but when we finally did, it was like someone had lifted a fog I hadn't even realized I was living in. Grace was there through all of it. She seemed to know when I was struggling before I even knew it myself. She'd come and put her head in my lap, or nudge my hand with her nose, pulling me back from whatever dark place my mind had wandered to. They have a word for that now. Emotional support animal. But that doesn't come close to capturing what she was to me. She was my anchor, my reason to get up in the morning, my proof that love was still possible, even for someone as broken as me. Spring came. I got a job, part-time at first, working maintenance at the Veterans Hope Alliance building. It was Margaret's idea. She said they needed someone who could fix things, and she knew I'd been good with my hands before everything fell apart. It wasn't much money, but it was money I earned. There's a dignity in that, a pride I'd forgotten I could feel. Grace came to work with me. She became a fixture at the office, greeting everyone who walked through the door. The other vets loved her. Some of them were in worse shape than I'd been. Living on the streets, battling addiction, fighting the same invisible wars I'd fought. Grace had a way with them. She'd sense which ones needed her most, and she'd go to them, sitting beside them, leaning against their legs, offering her quiet presence. I watched her work her magic, and I understood something then. Grace hadn't just saved me. She was helping me save others. The kindness that had passed between us on that cold morning was rippling outward, touching lives we'd never know about. That's how it works, I think. Love doesn't stay contained. It spreads, it multiplies. One small act of compassion becomes 1,000. Summer came. I moved into permanent housing, a real apartment with my name on the lease. I hung pictures on the walls, I bought a couch, I got a library card. Small things, ordinary things. But each one felt like a victory. Each one was proof that I was building a life again. And then, one evening in late August, I did something I'd been thinking about for months. I picked up the phone and called my daughter. Her name is Emily. She was 23 years old, and I hadn't spoken to her in almost 5 years. The last time we talked, I'd been drunk and angry, saying things I can't repeat. She'd told me never to contact her again, and I hadn't. Even when I got sober, even when I got help, the shame was too great. How do you apologize for that? How do you even begin? The phone rang 3 times. I almost hung up twice. Then a voice I'd never stopped hearing in my dreams. Hello? Emily? My voice cracked. It's Dad. Silence. So long I thought she'd hung up. Then, barely a whisper. Dad? I told her everything. About the streets, about Grace, about Margaret and the program and the apartment and the job. About the therapy and the medication and the work I was doing on myself every single day. I didn't ask for forgiveness. I didn't deserve that yet. I just wanted her to know that I was trying, that I was still here, that I loved her, even when I'd been too sick to show it. She cried. I cried. Grace sat at my feet, watching, knowing this was important. We talked for 2 hours that night. We've talked every week since. It's not easy. There's a lot of pain to work through, a lot of trust to rebuild. But we're doing it. slowly, carefully, like walking across thin ice, testing each step before committing our weight. She came to visit me last month, first time in 6 years. When she walked through my door, she froze, not because of me, because of Grace. "Dad," she said, kneeling down to pet her. "This is the dog, the one you shared your food with?" I nodded. "This is Grace." Emily looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "She saved your life. We saved each other." It's been 2 years now, since that cold November morning. 2 years since I shared my last meal with a stray dog under a railroad bridge. 2 years since Margaret saw us and decided to care. Grace's fur has grown back. She's put on weight. The fear has left her eyes, replaced by the peaceful confidence of a dog who knows she's loved. She sleeps on my bed now, curled against my feet, and I sleep through the night more often than not. The nightmares still come sometimes. I don't think they'll ever go away completely. But they're manageable now. They don't define me. I work full-time at the Veterans Hope Alliance now. I lead a support group for homeless vets every Thursday night. I tell them my story, all of it, the ugly parts and the hopeful parts. I tell them about Grace, about how sharing a can of Vienna sausages with a hungry dog was the beginning of my journey back to life. Some of them listen. Some of them aren't ready yet. I understand. I wasn't ready for a long time either. All you can do is show up, keep showing up. Be present for people even when they can't be present for themselves. That's what Margaret did for me. That's what Grace did for me. That's what I try to do for them. I think about that morning a lot. About what might have happened if I'd eaten that food myself. If I'd been too hungry, too desperate, too broken to share. I probably would have survived another day, another week, another month. But I don't think I would have survived much longer. Not really. The body can keep going long after the spirit has given up. I was running on empty in every way that mattered, but something made me set that can on the ground. Something made me choose compassion over survival, even when survival was all I had left. Maybe it was muscle memory from a lifetime of service. Maybe it was the last ember of the man I used to be, refusing to go out. Or maybe it was just grace, the kind you can't explain or earn, the kind that shows up when you least expect it, in the form of a hungry stray with knowing eyes. I named her well, I think. There's a quote I came across recently in one of the books Margaret keeps in the office waiting room. It says that sometimes the people who give the most are the ones who have the least. I understand that now. When you have nothing, when you've lost everything, the act of giving takes on a different meaning. It's not charity, it's recognition. It's looking at another suffering creature and saying, "I see you. You matter. You're not alone." That's what I said to Grace that morning, without using words, and she said it back. And Margaret saw it and was moved enough to stop and care. And now, 2 years later, that ripple is still spreading. Every veteran I help is another ripple. Every life we touch is another stone thrown in the water. I don't tell you this story to make myself look good. I'm not a hero. I'm just a man who made a choice, a small choice, on a cold morning when everything seemed hopeless. But that's the thing about choices. You never know which ones will change everything. You never know who's watching. You never know what chain of events you might set in motion with a single act of kindness. So if there's a lesson here, it's this. Share your last meal, even when you're hungry, even when you have nothing, especially then. Because the universe has a way of noticing, and sometimes, just sometimes, it sends someone to notice you right back. Grace is sleeping at my feet as I tell you this story. Her breathing is slow and peaceful. Outside my window, the leaves are turning gold and red, and soon it will be November again. Soon the cold will come. But I have walls now. I have heat. I have a dog who loves me and a daughter who's learning to trust me again. I have work that matters and people who count on me. I have a life. It started with a can of Vienna sausages and a broken-down bench under a railroad bridge. It started with 2 lost souls who found each other in the wreckage. It started with a simple radical act of choosing love over fear. That's not nothing. That's everything. That's what they don't tell you about hitting bottom. They don't tell you that sometimes, when you're standing in the darkest place you've ever been, a light appears. Not a big light, not a rescue helicopter, or a winning lottery ticket or some dramatic intervention. Just a small light. A pair of eyes looking at you with recognition. A moment of connection that reminds you that you're still human, still worthy of love, still capable of giving it. Grace was my light, and I was hers. And Margaret was watching, waiting to fan that tiny flame into something that could warm us both. I'll never be able to repay what I've been given. But I don't think that's the point. The point is to pass it on. To be for someone else what Grace and Margaret were for me. To notice, to care, to show up, even when it's inconvenient, even when it seems hopeless, even when you're not sure it will make any difference. Because it will. It always does. Even when you can't see it, even when you'll never know. Every act of kindness is a stone thrown in water, and the ripples go on forever. That's what Grace taught me. That's what a hungry stray dog on a cold morning showed me about what it means to be alive, to be connected, to be part of something larger than your own suffering. You don't have to be whole to help. You don't have to be strong to give. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is share your last meal with someone who has even less. Someone is always watching. Someone is always moved by love, even in the broken places, especially in the broken places. And that's how everything changes, not with a bang, not with a miracle. Just a cold morning, a shared meal, and a stranger who stopped to see what most people walked right past. Grace shifts in her sleep, sighing contentedly. I reach down and run my fingers through her fur, feeling the steady beat of her heart. Outside, the sun is setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Tomorrow, I'll go to work. I'll help another veteran fill out forms. I'll listen to another story of loss and pain, and maybe, if I'm lucky, hope. Tonight, I'm just going to sit here with my dog and be grateful. Grateful that I didn't give up. Grateful that she found me. Grateful that someone noticed and cared enough to stop. That's enough. That's more than enough. That's everything.